When it comes to the LNU, the SCU, and the CZU Lightning Complex wildfires, I would say that things are looking up. Where there is still some concern is with the weather forecast. Things are going to be getting hotter and drier over the next couple of days, so we're really going to be diving into that throughout this video. I'll also introduce you to some new maps and charts that I think are going to be helpful to look at. So looking at the fire map here, the first thing I'll say just has to do with the California wildfires in general. In the last 10 days, there have been 1.2 million acres burned in California, which is about the size of Delaware. And as of right now, there are 130,000 people still evacuated from their homes. The good news is, I would say that the pivot point in these fires has happened, and things are really going to start working in our favor for the next couple days, and hopefully we'll be able to wrap these fires up sometime soon. So when it comes to these maps, these red lines represent the fire perimeter. The red dots represent hotspots picked up by a satellite that kind of show where the active fire behavior is. So this far west fire that you see by the coast, that one is basically completely contained at this point. And when it comes to the west zone here, there's two areas we've been talking about. One on this western edge where you can see some of those little hotspots. This has been a tricky spot for firefighters just because of the rugged, steep terrain and also the large, heavy fuels. I do know they're throwing a lot of resources at this and getting some good lines in around this area. The number one priority with this west zone, though, is on this eastern side and southern side, where you can see there are still some hotspots in the area. And I know CAL FIRE has made this their number one priority with this fire to really get a good perimeter between the fire and these high populated areas. Now when it comes to the main fire with the LNU Lightning Complex, really the last critical point in this fire is this finger that you see sticking out into the Calistoga Middletown area. So you can see there are some really hot spots in this area and some areas where it's actually moved past the previous fire perimeter. I do know CAL FIRE is throwing a ton of resources at this, getting hand crews on the ground, getting some new dozer lines in, dropping retardant, really throwing everything they have at this area of the fire because like I said, it's really the last critical point for this east zone here. Now when we look at the eastern side, this is where there's some great news. It's basically just in the mop-up stage. They're even taking some resources off of this side because the fire has basically just stopped advancing and they're pretty much cleaning up at this point. There's also some good news on the southern edge of this fire. You can see there's not really any hotspots left in the area. Cities of Vacaville and Fairfield appear to be safe at this point. Now, I do know they're actively working to repopulate some of these areas. Part of the problem is when fire damages trees, it's very likely that wind can blow them over. So I think CAL FIRE is basically just clearing out some of the more dangerous spots before letting people back in. So if we look at some of the facts with the LNU Lightning Complex, you can see it's up to 357,000 acres. It is the third largest wildfire in the history of California. Now the good news is it's up to 33% containment. That's up from yesterday, and I think that's just going to continue to climb significantly in the next few days. As always, check the CAL FIRE website for all the most recent evacuations. Like I said, they're hoping to start repopulating some areas in the coming days. Now, we're up to 978 structures destroyed, 4 injuries, and there have been 5 fatalities associated with this fire. So if you or any of your loved ones have been affected by these wildfires, my thoughts and prayers go out to you. When it comes to personnel and equipment, things are looking up. We're up to 2,200 personnel, 18 crews, 11 helicopters, 293 engines, 56 dozers, 66 water tenders. There have been more and more resources coming in every day from states like Arizona, New Mexico, Oregon, Washington, even Montana and Texas have sent some crews. And overall in California, there are 100 aircraft on these fires. So a lot of resources being thrown at these fires. CAL FIRE is basically throwing every resource they have to put these fires out before things heat up again. So that is a nice little transition there into the weather forecast. Today's going to be about 88, Thursday's 91, Friday could be taken up to 94. So that's not exactly what we want to see. It's certainly not the triple digits we saw when all these fires started and had their most rapid growth, but we don't ever really want to see temperatures rising. The good news, though, is looking at the weekend, that trend is not going to continue and they'll actually come back down a little. So looking at the charts here, you can see the next 2 days, 88, 91. That's still not terrible. It's warmer than we'd like, but it's not triple digits. One thing to note, and I talked to a firefighter in the North Bay yesterday, and he said the really big problem with some of these North Bay fires has been the afternoon winds. That's mostly due to the coast is a lot cooler, and then the valley is a lot warmer. So later in the day, when that temperature difference becomes greater, you get a ton of winds because of the larger temperature gradient. Now, humidity is also something to watch here. You can see it will be going down from about 35% to 31%. That's not the teens or the 20s that we saw the last few days and early last week, but that's still a downward trend. And that's actually going to continue into Friday, where we can see it will get into the 20s. We're going to get those afternoon wind gusts, and temperatures will be up to 94. So Friday afternoon is looking like it could be a little tricky, but I'm hoping we have some great containment by then, and that this high priority, most critical area of the fire by Calistoga and Middletown has been able to gain some containment by then. So the next fire we're going to look at is the SCU Lightning Complex. And I would say this one is looking pretty good as well. This little spot right here has been completely contained. And then when we look at the main fire, the first thing I notice is that this western edge seems to have a lot less hot spots on it than it was showing yesterday. That's a great sign because that's the edge that is closest to a lot of these high populated areas. And I also know CAL FIRE has some great lines between this fire and these cities. So the western edge here is looking a lot better, and that's good news because that's really been the top priority for the last few days. The other area of concern with the SCU complex has been the southern edge, as pretty much every single day it just moves farther and farther into Henry Coast State Park, and you can see the very southern edge still has a lot of heat on it. There's some active fire in this area. Hopefully, we'll be able to get a little bit of containment on the southern edge in the next few days. So looking at the facts for the SCU Lightning Complex, we're up to 365,000 acres. This is officially the second largest wildfire in the history of California. Good news is, containment's up to 25%, and I think this number, along with the LNU and CZU, I think containment's going to be going way up in the next couple of days as they can really concentrate their resources on the remaining hotspots. As always, CAL FIRE is looking to repopulate some of these areas. I do know life safety is their number one concern, so check the CAL FIRE website for all recent evacuations. We're up to 31 structures destroyed and 5 injuries, so overall SCU has had less destruction than the other fires. Personnel is up over 1,600. We got 23 crews, 5 helicopters, 224 engines, 42 dozers, and 38 water tenders. I know yesterday there was new crews coming in from Utah, Montana, and Texas, and by the looks of it, those crews have showed up. So we're seeing a similar trend in the weather forecast to what we saw in the North Bay. You can see today and Thursday are going to be hovering around 88 degrees, and then Friday is going to come up to 92. The good news is that upward trend doesn't continue into the weekend. It actually comes back down and then stays around 90. So over the next 2 days, it's kind of a similar story to the North Bay. We got medium temperatures, not triple digits, but still pretty warm. And then those afternoon winds. That's really when a lot of the fire progression has been happening in the recent days. It's those afternoon winds that have been tricky. You can see humidities are still in the 30s, but dropping. So that's going to be something to watch as well. So the last forecast I want to look at is the CZU Lightning Complex. And I have some great news actually when it comes to this one. This northwest side, CAL FIRE was working extremely hard for a number of days to get some good lines in on this side. And they said they are very confident that the lines they've put in are going to hold, and even some evacuation orders have been lifted for Santa Clara County. So stay updated with the CAL FIRE website. On this western edge, we've been getting a lot of help from the marine influence. Some of that morning fog that's been coming in has been raising up humidities to almost 90 to 100% in the lower elevations, really helping with some of the fire suppression in this area. The number one priority, as we've talked about the last few days, has been on this eastern edge near Ben Lomond and Felton, working into Scotts Valley, and the southern edge working into Santa Cruz and UC Santa Cruz. I'll start with this southern edge. They not only have one line here, but two lines protecting Santa Cruz and UC Santa Cruz. And I will say, CAL FIRE representative was saying that the fire actually bumped in to their first control line and then extinguished. And you can actually see that the hot spots along this edge have pretty much gone out. So that's great news here, and the control line worked exactly as it's supposed to. So really the main area of concern left with the CZU Lightning Complex is still in this Ben Lomond Felton area. As you can see, there are still some hot spots, and some of these spots do appear to be moving past the previous fire perimeter. I do know CAL FIRE has thrown majority of their CZU resources right into this area to really get some confidence in their lines around here. I would love to share a quote that I heard from a CAL FIRE representative this morning regarding the CZU Lightning Complex. He said, "We're getting closer to mitigating this incident. We're getting closer to getting folks back home and having this fire put away and put to bed." So I don't think there's really anything better he could have said. That is some great news to hear about the CZU complex. So let's take a look at the numbers. We're now up to about 80,000 acres, 19% containment. Like the other fires, I think that containment's going to go way up in the next couple of days as they really focus their resources on the most critical areas. Evacuation orders are going to be important because I do know they're trying to get some repopulation efforts forward today, but they do have to clear some of the dangerous dead trees before they can let people back in. When it comes to damages and losses, we're up to 443 structures destroyed, and there is one fatality associated with this fire. Personnel is up. We now have over 1,600 personnel, 23 crews, 9 helicopters, 183 engines, 22 dozers, and 32 water tenders. Now, looking at the forecast, this is kind of the most interesting forecast of the three main fires. You can see that the temperatures are actually supposed to go down on Thursday, but then they jump up on Friday to 86, and then they kind of hover around the mid-80s throughout the weekend. Where it gets interesting, though, has to do with the winds. And you wouldn't really be able to tell it based on this graph right here, but what has been happening in this area has really been due to that marine influence. You get that really some good coastal fog in the mornings, you get that nice marine layer, and that's been keeping the coast nice and cool. But then as the valleys heat up, you get this temperature gradient and you get those strong winds. And we have been seeing those winds in the higher elevations and some areas along the coast. Today, the higher elevations could see 18 mile per hour wind gusts, and the coast could actually see some 30 mile per hour wind gusts. So, although this shows there's not really any wind, that is something to think about. Overall, temperature-wise, looking pretty good for the next 2 days. Humidity is about 50%, so that's great news as well. That I would say overall, that marine influence has helped, even though it's created some winds. All that humidity has really helped with the fire suppression. Now, I have a new damage assessment map to show you right here. I'll put the link for this into the description. Basically, Santa Cruz County put together this map where you can actually click in here, and I will say this is preliminary data. This hasn't been absolutely confirmed, but you can actually click in here and look at some of the streets, and it shows which houses have been assessed as no damage, affected, major damage, or destroyed. So if you live in the Santa Cruz area, I imagine this will be of interest to you. Again, link is in the description. Now the last thing I want to look at is the chart for how these fires have progressed over time. The main reason I like to look at this is because you see those huge numbers popping up on the news where they say 357,000 acres burned, and it's easy to feel a lot of fear and feel overwhelmed. But if you actually look at the chart, the acreage burned each day has significantly slowed down in the last few days. If you look here from the 19th to the 22nd, there were some days where it was growing at about 100,000 acres per day. This is showing the LNU Lightning Complex. But then you'll see around the 23rd, it has really started to level out, and I think that trend is just going to continue until we get these fires put to bed, as the CAL FIRE representative said. We have a similar trend for the SCU Lightning Complex. You can see again, 19th to 22nd, that's when we had those triple digits, some high winds, low humidities, fire growing at about 100,000 acres per day. But recently, it's really leveled off. It's a little steeper than the LNU graph, but that's mostly in that southern edge that's been burning into Henry Co. When it comes to the CZU, you can see 19th to 20th was the day where we saw the most fire growth, and then as of recent, it's been leveling off. And even some of this uptick is due to just new mapping of acres that might have burned in this period. So overall, I would say that we're looking pretty good when it comes to these three major fires. I'm going to keep you guys posted on these. Two things I will say. Thank you to CAL FIRE for all the work you've been doing and also all the updates you've been putting out. CAL FIRE is the only source I go to when trying to gather information for these videos, so thank you for the continuous reports. I'll also say thank you to San Jose State Fire Weather Research Lab. Basically everything I know about wildfire is due to my work with the Fire Lab and Dr. Craig Clements. As always, if you or any of your friends or family have been affected by these wildfires, my thoughts and prayers go out to you, and thanks for watching.